Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Today is our special guest day, where we will hear from a friend of the ministry who will share their insight and stories on truth in this chaotic world. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is Guest Thursday, and we have our special guest that continued from last week, Dave and Melissa Dunkel. They live in Tampa, Florida, and Holderness, New Hampshire, which, by the way, is the location of the movie on Golden Pond.
Indeed.
So it's a beautiful lake, by the way, and you get to even see, they filmed a lot of stuff at that lake, so it's pretty cool to see what they filmed many years ago. So we last week you talked to us about the beautiful story of just how you guys are enjoying life and the opportunity you had with this, how God led you to help this person with cancer, and we talked about connecting dots and the bigger story. And God is always inviting us to a bigger story. So let's talk about what's going on in New Hampshire. Maybe Dave, you could start with a brief history of how you personally wound up in New Hampshire, with your dad's property and what God gave you, and then, how he, it really through you and I, we decided, God says, well, why don't you do retreats there? And that started the whole thing, So maybe you could share just briefly about, because that's just part of the God bigger story all by itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was my dad. It's an interesting story. My dad always wanted to have a place up in the mountains in New Hampshire, and many years ago, he came up here and saw there was an ad in the paper, and he saw this place for sale. And he came up and met with the guy and said, we'd really like to buy it. And the guy said, well, I'm really sorry, but we decided last night to take it off the market. We're not going to sell it. So my father was disappointed because he loved it. He turned around, he drove back, and about a year later,
and drove back. By the way, was that Rhode Island?
Back to Rhode Island, yeah.
Okay.
From New Hampshire. A year later, God woke him up in the middle of the night and said, "Call Paul Teen." So he gets up and he calls him and he said, "It's unbelievable." He goes, "But last night we just decided to put the house on the market."
Oh man,
and,
that's awesome.
And so my dad said, "Well, don't bother. I'm on my way up with a check." And so they drove up, put the deposit down, and ended up buying this piece of property. And of course, right then I was getting ready to leave to move to Tampa to start the business. So I was disappointed because it was in a spot that I always loved, which being up in the mountains. And so I said, "Thanks, Dad, for buying it just as I'm going to Tampa." But long story short, they were here for a number of years. Their health started to fail. They had to move back down to Rhode Island to be near my brother. And better health care, and they put it on the market during the I don't know if you remember the real estate crisis back in 87, 88, the RTC and all those things. But
October 12th, 1987.
He remembers it well.
The crash of the market.
Yeah, I said, "Well, Dad, I'll tell you what, I'll buy it from you, and you can use it whenever you want to, and that way we'll keep it in the family." So I ended up buying it, and over a couple of years, did a couple of things, made some improvements. And about maybe 7 or 8 years later, when we took K-Force public, I said, "Well, I'm going to go ahead and buy more land up there." So, and this is before the value of real estate up here had come up. So I went and ended up buying another 300 and something acres up here. Because I wanted to I just have my own spot up on the top of the mountain. And so long story short, through God waking up my dad on that Saturday night, and years later, we ended up with a family estate here with, we've got a couple of houses here. My kids come up, the grandkids come up. And as you started, Rich, we decided, really, this is a golden opportunity to use this for ministry purposes and retreats. And
it's the perfect house for it.
it was perfect. And we're like, and so I think, God was at work way before we understood that he was at work, and he was purposing to do these. And, and I went on the retreat with you, Rich, and Linda, and I said, I really think that this place could be really perfect for that. So we gave it a shot, and we had our first retreat here. And then that's led to, I think, 10 years in a row. And then what was 1 week became 2. And then we got connected with other ministries and so forth. So it's just, it's really interesting how God has a much longer horizon. And there's a story that then brings Melissa into it, because he was working with her, and I'll share that in a moment, when we get to the next phase of what's happening in New Hampshire.
Yeah. Let me ask you a couple questions. When you bought that property, was it difficult to assemble 300 acres contiguous around you?
No, what happened was there was a builder who had owned 330 acres, and he was planning to develop it.
Yeah, okay.
But he didn't do his homework. He found out afterwards that he was going to have to improve the road because the grade of the road was too steep.
Yeah.
And it was going to be too expensive for him to do it. So he was using it initially just to do timber, and he hadn't really decided what to do with it. Coming on the heels of the real estate downturn, he just decided he was going to sell it. And so what ended up happening was I had Bob Pike, who runs the place for me. He actually was, through his property management company, was the front guy to buy the land, and he assigned it to me at the closing table. And the guy asked him, he said, "Well, what are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm assigning the sale," after he'd already signed the papers, of course. And he said, "Who are you assigning it to?" And he said, "To David Dunkel." And the guy says, "Well, I wouldn't have sold it for that price if I knew it was him."
Yeah. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, we ended up getting it for like a ridiculous price, like $600 and something an acre.
That's amazing.
And so, we were able to add on. We were limited to the number of homes we could put on it by virtue of the slope of the road, which you guys know the grade is quite steep, but and we've now basically finished that out. So we have built out the property, and it's actually perfect for retreats.
Oh, it is, yeah.
And also for the kids and the grandkids to use, and for other people who have come up and stayed. So it's really been awesome.
Yeah. And how did, because this is way before the retreats, how did you wind up? Because your main house has a total of, is it 10 bedrooms or what? How many bedrooms do you have in that?
Yeah, we've got 9 bedrooms, and I wish I could tell you how I ended up with it. All I know is that I was traveling, I was busy, and I kept coming up with this design, and I was going to use it for like Wildwood Conference Center and retreats, and we're using it for training for K-Force and whatnot. And I came up here and I said, "Oh my gosh, what have I done?" And so we ended up turning it into a home. And then, of course, as you know, we've made a lot of modifications to it and changes to it to make it more amenable to doing retreats here.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you remember, there was a time that we were down at the chapel.
Yeah.
And Tom Ewing was there, and he was playing Sacred Place. And we were working with some of the local people. This was early on, and I had a vision about that years before, and all of a sudden I said, "Oh my gosh, this is what I saw." And I didn't recognize it at the time as a vision, but I saw it, and I said, now I see that God was at work years before, and he had a plan for this whole thing, and I had no idea. I was just going for the ride.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. For anyone who's not been up there on a retreat or anything, I just want to say, literally, you drive through the gate to Shepherd's View Ranch and you feel the peace of God, the shalom of God, the favor of God just drop on that place, right? I mean, that is so tangible. And in that chapel, there is a chapel that overlooks the lake, and it's just stunning with the stained glass up there and the shepherd, and everything about it just points to Jesus 24/7.
Yeah.
It's the most amazing place.
Yeah, it really is beautiful. And the, so as Dave and I were saying, "Oh, let's do some retreats up there." We started doing them, and we could see that there was some activity going on in New Hampshire, and we've just been faithful to keep doing it. And you, of course, given it away to other groups there. But through your sowing of these up there in New Hampshire, over the last couple years now, God is, and particularly right now, literally right now, even this summer, is an exponential growth of the ministry, the work of God in New Hampshire. So talk a little bit about that. And I know Melissa's a big piece of this. And what is going on up there, and then what is happening that you're facilitating, putting together even this summer?
It really kind of goes to back in December, and back in a number of years ago, the K-Force board asked me, what are your thoughts and when you would step down and so forth, and I said, well, if I was going to pick an age and a date, it would probably be 2021, but I don't know, we'll just kind of play it by ear. And circumstances continued to point to, and the way that my successor, who's just a phenomenal CEO replacement, was developing and was prepared, it was pretty clear that okay, this is it. And so we had decided, yep, this is it. We're going to announce that I'll be stepping down as CEO, I'll be staying on as chairman. The day that we were announcing it, God wakes Melissa up and gives her a word. And now Melissa doesn't do anything without a cup of coffee. Okay? Nothing. I mean, life begins with a cup of coffee in the morning. And she has a faithful husband who brings it to her.
Yeah.
Who loves to bring it to her, by the way, along with 2 happy dogs that want to welcome her into the morning. So before I brought her the cup of coffee, she had written down a revelation that God had given her. And she walks in and she said, God just showed me this. And I was like, whoa. And I don't have it exactly, but it was something to the effect of that everything has worked out perfectly for Dave so that he can be on to his next assignment, which is more important. And wait for it, something to that effect. Can you correct me? And
no, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it was something to that effect. And I was like, whoa. And the way it worked out, I mean, it was literally a mic drop for me because it just worked perfectly. I exited after the best year in the history of the firm, the highest stock price in the history of the firm. Everything was just exited perfectly. And so the question was, now what? And so I said, well, I believe that we should start thinking about how we can go about kingdom business and can we do these retreats and whatnot. So we had just done the one in the fall, and we were talking about whether we're going to do it again. And for 25 years, we've had this music thing that's evolved from being secular to Christian music. And after 25 years, and Tom Ewing got involved, I said, we're probably done. And so Melissa said, I'm really sensing that we should do something more significant. We should use the opportunity in this beautiful place to do a significant thing, to engage with the local people and to be a blessing to these ministries. And so I was like, whoa, okay. And I'll turn it over to you because you actually were the catalyst to it.
Yeah, so I don't know, I think you guys may remember the dinner where somebody brought it up. What's going on with Woodsy stock? And
yeah, I think it was us and you guys and the Cornells were all sitting at the Common Man really talking about it, right?
Yeah, and I think prior to that, Dave was probably ready to say enough's enough. And then, I don't know, that breathed new life into it with a great group of people and just kind of snowballed from there. And ministries that I think, all of us were close with that we, felt could, use some help. And just all the seeds really that have been planted over the years are kind of growing in a new and unique way to benefit.
And then what one of the skill sets that Melissa had that came as a result of her foundation experience was knowing how to do these events. And so she said, what if we were to do something like have a chef come in and have a dinner on the deck and welcome people in the local community and have the ministries come in and tell their story and use it as kind of a fundraiser, but also a chance to expand the reach of these ministries. And I said, there's a guy that I know that served at one of the K-Force events, and he's a really good chef. And he came up one time to one of the board meetings. Let me see if I can reach him. And we were actually, I think, in Nashville at the airport.
Yeah.
At the airport, and I called him up. He had just landed from Paris, and he said, "So good to hear from you." And I said, "Philippe, what are you doing on Labor Day?" He said, "I am free for Labor Day. What do you want me to do?" And we said, this whole thing just worked out. So we have Philippe Dad coming up, who is, and I don't even.
He's an amazing James Beard award-winning chef, and he's been on some of the programs on TV, competing with the Iron Chef or whatever. He's just so talented, and he'll cook for everyone, and got a little concert planned with Land of Color music, and it'll just be a great night. So
yeah, and that was all Melissa's doing, and I said, "Well, I can't do this." I said, "This melts me down. This is trauma. I don't understand how to do this." And she goes, "I got this. I do this. I know how to do this. I got it." And I said,
"That's awesome.
Okay, you got it." So just another cool example that God took something that each of us had, put it together, and now brought us together to do it.
Yeah. Tell a little bit about what is Lydia's house and what is the mansion.
Yeah, his mansion is one that I know very well. It's another cool story. Back in 2014-15, our band was coming up, and we were doing some local Christian rock band. We were doing some local churches, and we said, some friends said, "Well, would you consider going down to this place, his mansion?" And I said, "I've never even heard of it." And they said, "Well," I said, can you show me or tell me more about it?" So they brought it up on the computer, and I looked at it. And as I was looking at the website, God says to me, he goes, "I want you to come alongside these people." And I'm like, "What? I don't even know who they are." So I said, "Okay." So we ended up coordinating it, and we went down to do this really fun concert for the kids down there, and brought us alongside, and we got to be really good friends with them. And God said, "I want you to be a blessing to these people." So his mansion works with, I believe it's 18 to 32 or 34-year-old people. It's entirely supported by donations. It's not an insurance thing or anything. And what they do is they work with people who are broken, and they help them they help restore their lives. It's over a year period of time, and they assign a servant leader to walk with them, and literally using a biblical approach, and basically the 7 exceptional things of abiding. They restore lives. They rebuild them back into following Christ, being useful citizens, and being restored. And so the first time we went down there, my heart melted for these folks. And I said, I got to come alongside and help them. And we've been doing it now, 8 years.
But many of them are addicted.
Yeah.
They've been abused. They have just terrible.
It's unbelievable.
Stories.
Some of the stories are like, I don't even know how you're still going. I don't know how you're still alive. And then you hear the story of restoration, and you hear what's happened to them, and you say, my gosh, look at what Jesus did and how they restored, and the testimony that comes out of it. And so we've been blessed to be a blessing to them. And then along comes, we kept hearing about Lydia's house, and Scott and Kristen Cornell, who moved up near us now by the lakes. And so we got to be good friends with them, and they kept bringing up Lydia's house. And we said, well, tell us about that. And very similar stories dealing with women who are coming out of broken lives. Again, dealing with, and you guys have already had Teresa on, and we said, well, wouldn't that be cool if we did something, because they're both thematically consistent. We did something to help them to raise the visibility, to raise some funds, and to use the blessing of this place to do that. And so Melissa cooked the whole thing up, and basically has put it all together. And we're now 6 weeks away?
Something like that. Yeah.
It's coming up quick. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to do an auction and whatever ways we can to raise money in a raffle. And whatnot.
And we got a cool scene that we're going to do up on the deck, and Philippe's coming up with a sous chef and somebody else, and we're going to have the folks from Lydia's house serve, and then we're going to videos produced where we're going to tell the stories to the folks that come. The Land of Color guys are going to do a brief worship concert that night, and then that'll be that, and then everyone's welcome to stay for Woodsy Stock the next day, which will be a worship. Land of Color playing, Tom will be playing, our band will be playing.
And that's always a beautiful day.
Yeah, and the rumor is that Rich Case might share from the Word,
That's
but
it.
It hasn't been confirmed yet.
Yeah, we'll see if God gives me a word for that. And on top of all that, we've been doing retreats, and I know you have. You actually did a retreat for a young adults in your church and had them up to New Hampshire through abiding, and they got excited about that, and now they're coming back to have another big deal. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we can keep on Kathy, the stuff you're doing, and just New Hampshire. There's a lot going on in New Hampshire by what God is building. So talk about that, you guys, about your other activity you're doing this summer.
Yeah, it was really cool because we got connected to Kathy and Dan via Rick Ferris in the C12 group, and they came up years ago. And of course, I remember Kathy, the redhead, who was up at 5:30 in the morning at the same time that I was, as I was upstairs spending time in the Word. I would walk down the stairs, and there she was sitting. And you remember when you were sitting in the chair over there.
I remember that little corner in that chair.
The little corner, and I looked over and I said, "This one's special." She's on it. So they've been working it in parts of New Hampshire, and then Scott and Kristen Cornell moved up here as well. So we said, well, maybe we can bring some of the folks from our church up. And so I was actually people not only from our church, but people from our local community. And they came up last year, and we had 26. I mean, it was a circus. It was unbelievable how many people we had. We had like 6 cars coming up. Way too many people, way too big. But we pulled off this great time together, spending time abiding in the Word. And our pastors came as well. And they came as participants, not as leaders. And so Tom and I did that. And many of them really glommed onto it. And a couple of them specifically said, we'd like to be able to teach this and do leadership. We want to come back and do more. We want to go deeper. And then so what happened is we actually ended up having other people who couldn't make it last time are coming. And so we're going to have a combination of abiding, discerning God's will, which will be the second for others, and then introducing some elements of prayer from Andrew Murray.
That's good.
And so, because a big part of discerning God's will is hearing what God has to say, and how do I pray and ask it. So, and Rich, I'll be asking for your help to put all this together. It's still rattling around in my little pea brain. But to be able to share it, and there are several folks in this group who now want to be able to take it and lead it. And so it's been fun. So they're actually going to come up a little bit early, and Tom and I are going to spend some time with them to help them get started on facilitating and learning how to actually do this. And so they'll bring it back to Tampa. We'll help them back in Tampa in teaching abiding. They also use experiencing God for new believers. And then discerning God's will. We'll see what else is going on.
Yeah. And the on top of that, with C12, obviously Dave's a board member of C12. And way back when, 10 years ago, we had Rick Ferris, who's a C12, what they call a chair, and he really was struggling, but he came to a retreat and received it, and then he started teaching his members, and they growing, and then his members, which obviously was Dan,
which is how we got
Dan
connected,
and Kathy connected, that like a Dean Harrington received it and took abiding. He took it to he actually got employees all over the country, and he was doing Zoom courses that we have on abiding all over the country, there in New Hampshire. And Dave, talk a little bit about the growth of just C12 expanding, particularly as it's in line with what we've been giving them in the abiding. Talk about how that's been part of all that's going on up there in New Hampshire. It's really remarkable.
Yeah, it kind of came out of initially your discipling assignment to me at Spiritual Leadership Institute, one that you probably still regret to this day. Don't take a call from an 813 area code. But having gone through that and then done the abiding, I was actually at a C12 chair meeting in North Carolina. And I stood up and there was a room full of people. And I said, if anyone's interested in doing a retreat of learning how to abide in the Word and walk with God, let me know. Here's my phone number. I just gave it out in the room. There's 100-some people. My phone was ping, 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 ping. And one of the pings was Rick Ferris.
Yeah.
And so Rick said, I'd love to do it. And I had met Rick previously because he was from Rhode Island, and I actually grew up in Rhode Island. And I was shocked that there was a Christian there, given how dark it was. But he's done an amazing job there. And so Rick and I got to be friends. And, he came up and brought his group, and Kathy and Dan were part of it. And he's now permanently staked out week 2 and for the follow-on teachings. And
but the ripple effects of what you guys have poured into that group, and it has grown just exponentially throughout the region. And so you really see God just moving mountains out here.
Yeah, and the cool thing about C12 is that it's based on taking the kingdom of God into the marketplace. And so it was started 30 years ago by Buck Jacobs, Mike Sharrow, CEO now. I get 2 CEOs, the 2 best in the country that I get to chair.
Yeah.
And Mike is just sold out for God. He's just grown like a weed. C12 is now over 3,000 members. We're in multiple countries. We'll be expanding into more countries. But it's very clear that God has chosen to use C12 as a vessel to reach the market. And what he showed us was, hey, let's take abiding to the chairs, and then through the chairs to the members, and then the members through their employees at their companies. And so we've got one of the guys who's in my C12 group in Tampa, I hope is coming up, Chris Reed, will be coming up to our abiding this fall. And he's got 1,000-something employees, runs a call center, just sold out. More multiplication happening, and just the privilege of being able to give it away, having them come up and enjoy it, experience the beauty of being up here, especially in the fall, and then to go back and replicate abiding. Chris was on the call that I did using Teams for K-Force, and he joined in, and a bunch of other guys joined in from outside of K-Force. So one of the cool things that came out of COVID was Zoom and Teams, and because it let multiplication happen in a way that we never could have.
Right. It forced multiplication, honestly.
It forced
it. The window for it, yeah.
Yeah, and I know, Kathy, you're doing lots of retreats up in New Hampshire, you and Dan, and then Scott and Kristen Cornell are doing retreats, and Scott and Kristen particularly have been having pastors come in their churches so that and again, as you look at God's bigger story, 10, 12 years ago, Dave and I say, well, let's do a retreat. And you got this beautiful place that God gave you. Let's use that, And then just from that sowing and faithfulness of just keep sowing, it's exploding. And exploding, I mean, it's not everybody in New Hampshire is becoming a believer, but it's growing. It's really growing with now people are passing it on.
Right.
And Dave and Melissa are right in the center of that. And interesting enough, it'll be fun to see, and we'll have you back, is that now that you're going to spend more time in New Hampshire, all that God will have you be a part of, because now you'll even have more time to sow up there of just sharing.
Right.
If you guys just share the joy of your life, you're going to have people, what I call lining up around the block, that would say, I'd like to experience that.
Yeah, we're actually seeing the sowing in Tampa too.
Yes, in Tampa,
which is really cool. So you sow where you're planted, and we, because we're snowbirds, we get to go from one place
you
to
get
another.
A little bit of both.
We get to do a little bit of both, and we've seen just incredible stuff happening. So it's been fun, and the best part is I get to do it with wife now and walking out in unity. And, I've never had that. And so, God's blessed me with the best thing, which is a partner to do it with.
Yeah. Melissa, how are you enjoying the, because you're hosting now a lot of activity up there. How are you enjoying all that? And how are you able to stay enjoying it without getting burdened by it all?
Oh, it's not a burden at all. It's just a shift. It's a huge shift. Trust me, it's way easier than, having to make payroll every week.
I was going to say, God has given you gift sets naturally for this, and He has honed them all along. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not a burden. It's just a shift. It's a change of, what you're doing day to day. So it takes a little getting used to, but it's good.
Yeah, and thank you to Kathy, for Kendra and Nathan. They came up and met with
they're amazing, right?
Yeah, and having them do it will free up Melissa to be more relational, and because Susie and Melissa end up being the kitchen crew, and we wanted to free them up to be able to spend more time with the people and be engaged in the retreat instead of just serving.
Right.
Well, and you've got, in Kendra and Nathan, you also have some amazing prayer warriors. So not only are they in there preparing the food for you, but I guarantee you they are just laying prayer tracks ahead of everything that's going on. So
and they want to join. They said, "Is it okay if we come in and sit in?"
Oh yeah.
So it's just really cool. You look at how he wove it all together.
Oh yeah.
Years ago and then today, and what's waiting ahead, we don't know, but we're fired up.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So if anybody is in New Hampshire area, the New England area, and you want to come up to that Woodsy Stock on Saturday, the weekend of Labor Day, let us know. Or if you have any more interest in supporting the ministries up there, Lydia's house and his mansion, let us know. We'll connect you with that because they really operate completely by donation, and they give it all away. And it's the remarkable restoration of lives that is there anything more cool than that, to actually experience it.
True success stories because they're connecting them to Jesus.
Yeah, and they both they both have received and are using abiding, because they know that's the key, and so it's fun. So anyway, thank you, Dave and Melissa, for joining us. We'll have you back again and have another catch-up update of what's happening next and your next season, because we can tell it's going to be fun. We don't know all it's going to be, but it's going to be fun, and you're going to just be part of God's bigger story. And what a privilege it is to know you and experience your joy, and to see the fruit that is happening just because you've actually enjoyed it and you keep enjoying it. So we just pray that you will. So thank you for sharing.
We can trace all back to SLI and the time that you were assigned to me.
That's it. That's right. Yep. You gave me who did you give me? What does that guy do? Are you getting this abiding, Dave? No.
That's great.
Stay with it. Yeah, it was fun. Well, Father, we thank you for the privilege of Dave and Melissa, and what a thrill it is to see their life, just the enthusiasm of their life, the joy of them being together, the privileges that you've given them to enjoy now this season, but you're calling them to your bigger kingdom work that they actually get to be a part of, and they understand it's receiving and giving it away. And I pray that they'll keep receiving it, stay in that beautiful sweet spot that they're in, and that we're going to see the magnitude of what's happening in both Tampa and New Hampshire, all because Dave and Melissa had a heart to give it away. And so we praise you and thank you for that in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us, everyone, and so good to hear just the faithfulness of God in your story. So thanks for sharing that with us. And for the rest of you, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow with our End Times Fridays.
Yep.
So have a great afternoon.
All right, we'll see you soon.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.